Hey, what's going on, everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of the Alec Walt Show. I'm your host, Alec Walt, along another very special guest, and today we're talking about the Washington football team. Yes, the team, when year one with Ron Rivera, ended up making the playoffs. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about the year one with Ron Rivera, some of the moves they made this offseason to improve for this season, and preview some of their picks for the 2021 NFL Draft. Joining us to talk about all things about the Washington football team is Scott Jackson, the game day broadcaster. Scott, welcome to the show. I really appreciate it.
Good to be on, Alec. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. Last time you and I spoke, we were talking about the addition of Ron Rivera to the coaching staff here in Washington. And in one season, he's already led this team to the playoffs. Think about it. Last year, they had the number 2 overall pick. Yeah. Are you surprised at how quickly Rivera was able to turn things around here in Washington?
You know, if you would have said, "Hey, they're going to go 7-9," I'd say that's a really good season. I would take that in year one. But if you'd have told me going into year 7-9 would make you division champion, I probably would have said, "Yeah, come on. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's not going to happen, right?" But it did. So, I mean, look, it was a weird year. You know, Dak Prescott gets injured. The Eagles flat out imploded. The Giants really lost any chance of being good when Saquon Barkley went down. You know, that their offense was going to be handicapped after that. And, you know, it just kind of fell into place for Washington, and it wasn't pretty at times. I mean, there was the whole Dwayne Haskins debacle. You know, you could tell early on that Ron Rivera was not really confident in him. He finally makes the move. And then, you know, Kyle Smith did some good things, and he gets hurt right away. I mean, it was absolutely – or Kyle Allen, gets hurt right away. And, you know, then what? You know, oh, my God, Alex Smith's going to have to play. I mean, which is just the most ridiculous thing ever, right? After seeing him and what he went through, you know, that time about a year and a half ago, and even seeing him in that Rams game, I remember after that Rams game going, God, I hope he never plays again. I don't want to ever see him on a field again. You know, he proved what he proved, right? He held Aaron Donald in his back. I don't want to see Alex Smith on the field. I was uncomfortable with it. Well, lo and behold, a few weeks later, I have to see him again, and he actually was pretty damn good. And, you know, he had some moments, but then, you know, as the year went on, he broke down a little bit. And I think at that point you kind of realized, hey, you know what, they're going to have to address the quarterback situation. He's not a long-term solution. Maybe he could be part of, you know, of a group of quarterbacks, but he's not going to be your guy going into next year. And obviously they felt that way as well. I've said this to a lot of people, Alec. I really think those 5 quarters that Taylor Heinicke played really opened the eyes up for a lot of people that weren't sure what Scott Turner's offense was or could be. And you saw Taylor Heinicke in 5 quarters make more big plays than any of the quarterbacks did the whole year, right? I mean, he was just fearless, and he was throwing the ball downfield, and he showed the mobility and what he could do, and he gave you that big play opportunity, which you didn't have with Alex Smith. And, you know, Smith gave you, or Kyle Allen, gave you some of that, but, you know, he didn't get to play that long. And, you know, and obviously Haskins was just a mess, especially at the end of the season when that Carolina game, he was so awful. I mean, you know, if you go back to that game, if they had been able to get him off the field a little bit earlier, maybe they could have salvaged that game and won it with Heinicke coming off the bench. But, yeah, it was a weird year. I mean, look, Rivera was going through cancer treatments in the beginning of the year at times. You know, really looked tired, you know, and really physically exhausted, as you would expect, going through what he was going through, the radiation and everything. And, you know, sometimes people didn't agree with some of the moves he made late in games. You know, he didn't use timeouts. And a couple of games, the first 4 weeks of the season when they were losing to preserve time, it almost looked like he waved the white flag there. But, you know, the one thing I'll say about him and this group is nobody ever questioned, like nobody ever said, hey, I don't think, you know, coach is doing this right. I mean, everybody always bought into Ron from the jump. I think that was huge. I think, you know, he had one message all year. Everybody bought into it. People believed in him when he made these tough decisions. And I'm excited to see what they could do this upcoming season.
So speaking about this upcoming season, they made a lot of moves here in free agency. We talked about how they needed to improve their playmaking on the outside. Curtis Samuel, a former Carolina Panther, is now with the Washington football team on a 3-year contract. He was formerly with Ron Rivera, obviously, when he was with Carolina. What are your thoughts on him joining Terry McLaurin? Again, they were together in Ohio State. Now they're together here in Washington.
You know, so many times, Alec, in particular with this franchise over the years that I've covered and watched as a fan, in free agency, they grab a guy that doesn't necessarily have a scheme fit. You know, doesn't necessarily come here beloved because he's getting a lot of money coming in. There's that internal jealousy, you know, like, oh, you're paying guys on the outside, not paying the guys on the inside. But the good thing about Samuel, he comes in here. They know him. They've coached him. They drafted him. They know what he can do and how they can fit him in. the guy who could have hard feelings, right, and Terry McLaurin, who's your number one receiver, does it because this is a friend of his, a guy he really loves and respects. So he's not going to have that, oh man, this is the big money guy here, rolling his eye. That's not going to be an issue. So I think from that standpoint, it's really good. And again, Scott Turner has a feel for the player, knows what he wants to do with him. And I think, again, Scott, he had some ups and downs this year, as you would expect as a rookie offensive coordinator. But I thought as the year went on, he did some really good things, in particular with the game plan they had in that Tampa game that they lost. With what he was able to do with Taylor Heinicke. But I think that was a really good pickup. I mean, and it made sense. I really think people were kind of circling that really, during the year when they saw the free agent receivers are going to be, they're like, oh yeah, Curtis Samuel's going to be with the Washington football team. And, look, Ron has been consistent. He's brought in people that he's comfortable with and that he's familiar with.
Well, talking about someone Washington is familiar with, he was on the team before Rivera came by. Ironically, the day you and I are speaking on a podcast, you guys make a trade. Eric Flowers with the Miami Dolphins is now coming back to Washington. He signed a 3-year deal with the Dolphins last year. He really turned things around in 2019 playing for Washington. What are your thoughts on the signing on what looks like a very good interior offensive line?
Yeah, it's huge because I think they took a step back on the other side of Sheriff last year. Wes Martin really struggled. Schweitzer ended up playing pretty well. He's kind of a journeyman. He's a plug-in guy. I mean, he did a pretty good job when he had to play. And of course, you lost Sheriff for a while last season, so you had 2 backups in there at one point. They tried to use Sadiq Charles in one game, and literally he was done after 2 snaps. I think his whole season was over, the rookie at LSU. So it seems to me now with this move that it kind of points to, okay, Sadiq Charles is going to be a tackle. Because, I think there's some of us wondering, is he a guard or is he a tackle? Now, if he's your left tackle, that also – that makes things a little bit easier in this draft in terms of you don't have to go chasing a tackle necessarily. Morgan Moses is going to be on the right side. Cornelius Lucas played really well for you last year when he played left tackle and had to play a little bit of right at times. So I think, you can definitely feel good about that if that's in fact the case. But, it's still going to have to be played out through competition and those kind of things. But I think, Flowers saved his career coming here. Moving to the guard position, you got to give Bill Callahan, the former offensive line coach, who's now with the Cleveland Browns, a lot of credit for that. They did a really good job, moving that guy over and making him a guard because he was not a good tackle, obviously. Coming out of the University of Miami, really struggled with the Giants. It looked like his career was over and had a really good season with Washington and got that contract with the Dolphins and now back here. So I like the pickup. I thought that was a smart move and a little bit surprising, just a couple days before the draft to see something like that happen.
So let's move to the defensive side of the ball, going with one more free agent signing here. It seems like pretty much every defense Ron Rivera runs, you guys are extremely productive at the cornerback position. We saw it with guys like Josh Norman in Carolina last year. You guys had one of the better duos with Darby and guys like that. Now Jackson's coming in a 3-year, $40.5 million contract. What are your thoughts on the new corner here in Washington?
Well, look, I thought Darby played well, right? He had a good season here, but he got paid. He got a better deal elsewhere. What happens in free agency, and then you're looking. Jackson may be an upgrade. He's a physically bigger, stronger guy, a little younger as well. But it's interesting. He's one of these guys that does well with like the PFF model, right? But in terms of the old school way, you would look at a corner like, well, where are the interceptions, right? Where are the plays? But are they thrown away from him? Then you got to look at all these other things. All I know is this: when he played Washington this year, he did a hell of a job of McLaurin. He did a really good job of McLaurin when they played Cincinnati this year. So I think it's exciting. I think Jack Del Rio, I think he did a nice job with this defense. And we'll talk, when we get to the draft stuff. My feeling is they got to go heavy linebacker coming up in the draft. That's still the biggest weakness. And your head coach is a linebacker. Your D coordinator is a linebacker. All year they talked about how, damn it, they want better linebacker play. It would be crazy if they didn't go with a couple linebackers in this draft, especially with that 19th pick. It seems like it's a sweet spot for it. But anyway, so I think they'll do that. But yeah, I like to pick up a Jackson. Look, the defensive line is really good. They're going to get Ioannidis back. He didn't play most of last season. He's actually been, the best pass rusher on the interior. Jonathan Allen had a great year. Deron Payne just got his 5th-year option picked up. They've got a really good, strong interior. And obviously everybody saw what Chase Young and Montez Sweat did last year together. And I'll be interested to see Ryan Kerrigan. I don't think it's over yet. He hasn't signed anywhere until he does. I still hold the hope that maybe, he would come back on maybe a lesser deal and they could, if he would accept playing a little bit less like he did last year.
So looking at the defense, you talked a lot about, linebacker, whatnot, one of the best players on your defense last year was your safety, Cameron Curl, who was one of the best safeties overall the entire rookie class. You got stuck in the 7th round. He actually plays the same position as Landon Collins. Now, we've seen these reports about potentially changing positions and things like that. You know, if you were Ron Rivera, what do you think would be the best role for the high-paid safety you guys brought in just a couple years ago from the Giants?
You know, first of all, he's got to be healthy, right? Because he's coming back from a serious injury. You know, we'll see where he's at. But I don't take Cameron Curl off the field, you know, just because Collins is back. I mean, I got to figure out a way to get them both. Now, they both have very similar skill sets. Although I think Curl's better in coverage than people thought, you know, as the year went on. So that was interesting. You know, there has been some talk of using him in kind of a hybrid position, linebacker or whatever, talking about Landon Collins, you know, some things. And Ron Rivera kind of, you know, said no to that, but it didn't rule it out either, you know. So that will be interesting because they're going to have to figure out a way to do it because it's not like there's a big market for Landon Collins and somebody's going to knock on your door and say, hey, we'll take Landon Collins off your hands for, you know, a 3rd-round pick or something. Because there's not. I mean, he got paid well and, you know, didn't really perform. You know, and sad thing was actually the game he got hurt. He was actually having his best game of the year. He finally really looked like he was playing fast in that Jack Del Rio scheme, but now he's kind of a setback. So that will be an interesting thing for sure. Because I'm still trying to figure out how they're gonna make that work. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them draft another safety too, more of a coverage guy, obviously, because I think they have 2 very much so guys you called were in the box safeties in Curl and obviously Landon Collins.
So the NFL draft is 2 days away, Thursday night. Washington, of course, has the 19th overall pick. Before we talk about names with that specific pick, what do you think are the draft needs for the Washington football team?
Well, like I said, from the jump, I mean, linebacker, I know these people talking about them moving up and, you know, grabbing Trey Lance or, you know, if Justin Fields were to fall. I just don't see that happening. Look, Ron Rivera he's got a long contract. He's got the ability to be patient. They brought in Fitzpatrick. I think, look, with Fitzpatrick, Allen, and Heinicke, you got 3 quarterbacks very similar, like play loose, mobility kind of guys, you know, that they're not afraid to throw the ball and take chances downfield. You know, so I think you get 3 quarterbacks that are pretty similar. Now, not to say that if you find a developmental guy you would like later, you wouldn't do it. You know, you could get out of the Kyle Allen business pretty easily. Same with Taylor Heinicke for that matter, although he got a little bit of money. I would think he would probably be in a better spot than Allen at this point for the final roster. But anyway, you know, I just don't think it's something you have to force, you know, and I think that's why they went and got Fitzpatrick. It buys them a little bit of time. They don't have to force it. In 19, you really can't be like, hey, I have to have a quarterback because it's out of your hands. I mean, there's so many teams in front of you. And as we've seen, people overdraft quarterbacks all the time. So you really can't be in that mode. Now, if something fell in your lap, that's where it becomes interesting. But to me, it's linebacker. You could certainly use another corner. You know, offensive line is always going to be something you look at. We mentioned safety before. I wouldn't be surprised if they took a receiver at some point as well. But I think linebacker, I think you could hit in a couple rounds. The first round, you know, like Micah Parsons probably not going to be there at 19. I wouldn't think. You know, Owusi Karamoa, I think they changed the pronunciation of that. It was Karamoa at one point. But anyway, Karamoa, Jeremiah, the kid out of Notre Dame, he's a freak athlete. He's kind of a hybrid player. He's interesting. I think Zaven Collins out of Tulsa is interesting as well. Although, you know, some people say he doesn't hit tackle. He's as physical as you'd want him to be at that position. But I know he can cover in space, which is something Washington's been dying to get a linebacker and cover in space forever. I mean, John Bostic does a nice job calling the signals and knowing where to be, but, you know, Father Time wasn't kind to him in stretches last year. You know, he really looked old, but then he played well at the end of the season. You know, I think they like Holcomb as a starter. They brought in Gerard Mayo from the Giants in the offseason, but I think he's more of a stopgap guy, if anything. So I do think there's room for, you know, 2 rookie linebackers to come in here and at least one of them start right away, and the other one be pushing, you know, to be a starter. Because, you know, with the loss of Kevin Pierre-Louis on the outside, they have that outside position, and then I think you got to find somebody on the inside to kind of give Bostic the push.
So you talked earlier about like the fact that Washington's in a tough position to get a new quarterback. Obviously, you know, they have the 3 guys who you don't exactly know if those are any of the future quarterbacks, maybe Heinicke, whatnot. Would you say Heinicke has the upper hand now? And do you think he is good enough? Or like, are you confident in him going into next season if he was going to be the starter and they don't get a QB here in this draft?
Alec, you might notice here the shirt. Old Dominion. That is my college. See, I'll put it a little closer.
Oh, there we go.
So when I went to college, of course, there was no football. We had no football. It had been gone. It was a dream, and it fell apart like my junior year. But anyway, or the year before I came there, before my freshman year, excuse me. So many, many years later, when football comes back, and Taylor Heinicke is obviously the stud quarterback at Old Dominion. He's the Walter Payton Award winner for the football championship conference, which is the 1AA level. So yes, I'm a big Taylor Heinicke believer and fan. However, I do know he's a slight guy. He's not a very big guy. He got a AC joint injury in the playoff game that he started. He started a game in Carolina a few years back with Ron Rivera. He dislocated his left elbow. He played another game with the Texans off the bench. I think he hurt his knee. I mean, so he's had these injuries, unfortunately, in his career when he's had his opportunities. Could he play a few weeks and be successful and effective? I think so in that system. But I do think like there's always that feeling with a backup guy like him who was just wheeling and dealing out there, no fear. Like, what would it be like if you gave him the job? Would that change his approach? Would it change the way he played the game? Would it impact him if he, instead of dove for the pylon like he did in the Tampa game with an incredible play, if he slid? Would he not be as good of a player? Or as if he was less daring, would he be more of a guy who's worried about keeping his job, and instead of trying to throw in a tight window, he's checking down? I don't know. I mean, those are always the fascinating things when these guys get their opportunities. But I think there's some upside there. Do I think they're banking on that? No, I think they feel good about, hey, if we have to play him a game or two or throw him in a game, in sudden change, he can handle it, and he showed that this year. So I think that's how they see him. It's Fitzpatrick's gig. The thing about Fitzpatrick is, wherever he's been, is always like a guy behind him, right? Like, this is the next whatever, whether it was down with Tua, with the Jets, it was Darnold, and all these other places he's been, there's always been somebody that's next. And that's always kind of thing that's dogged him. They don't really have that person right now here. I mean, I know Rivera likes Kyle Allen a lot. I mean, he made that very clear at the end of the season. I think it's one of the things why Alex Smith had hard feelings about Rivera. At the end of the year, people were like, well, could you have ever saved the season if it wasn't for Alex Smith? And he goes, well, yeah, Alex, he said a lot of nice things about Alex. Then he went, but I think Kyle Allen was going to be able to do that for us had he not gotten hurt. So I think there's definitely belief in him. And I think the same goes for Taylor or Heinicke. But, I still think, Fitzpatrick, just based on what he's making, they might call it an open competition. But he's played in so many games and started so many games, I would think he's the guy.
So whoever's going to be the quarterback here in Washington, I'm looking at your schedule right now, and it is brutal. Your 2021 opponents, you got Kansas City, Tampa, Green Bay, Seattle, Chargers, your division. It's not going to be easy next year for you guys, no matter who the quarterback is.
No, it's not. And, I try not to get every year we do the schedule game, and then the games you think are hard end up not being as hard, and the ones that look soft aren't soft. Like Washington, if you look at this season, for example, they lost the games you quote should have won. They lost the Giants twice. They had Cleveland, they were winning in Cleveland, fell apart late in that game. But yet they won at Pittsburgh, and granted, winning at Dallas on Thanksgiving doesn't mean as much when Dak Prescott's not playing, but that was the games they won. Won at San Francisco, which looked to be impossible at the beginning of the year, but obviously they got, a ton of injuries there and they were beat up. So they won some games that when you were playing the schedule game early in the year, you would have never thought they were going to win. And they lost games you thought they would win. So, there's always somebody that you think is going to be really good and take the next step that doesn't. And there's always a team that you don't expect that comes out of nowhere and has a great season. So, yeah, but on paper, it looks like a killer. I mean, there's no question. I mean, some of those teams are usually consistently, really, really tough places anyway. So, well, we'll see. I mean, I'm curious to see what the Eagles are like. I mean, I'm not sure they did the right thing by, just dumping Carson Wentz as quickly as they did. So I think that's interesting in the division. Everything feels great in Dallas because Dak's fine, but their defense was historically horrendous last year. I mean, did they solve all those problems? We don't know. Ezekiel Elliott looked like a guy who lost something. He wasn't the same guy. The Giants is feel good as they felt at times, going 6-10, and, whining that the Eagles didn't win that last game for them. I mean, they were still 6-10. And and Daniel Jones, he showed some signs of being a pretty decent quarterback, but it wasn't like he's a superstar. And, Saquon Barkley has yet to show, can he make it through a 16-week season? I don't know. Or a 17-week season.
Yeah, now it's 17.
17-week season. So there's just a lot of questions just in the division still. And that's what's crazy. We're in April and people just like going bonkers about the NFL, year round now, and like try to forecast this stuff. But you really, it's not a popular thing to say in our industry, but you don't know. You really don't know until they actually start playing again.
Yeah, it's going to be a crazy year this year. I'm really looking forward to seeing Ron Rivera in year 2 with Washington. We're going to play this schedule game all off season, kind of predicting where everyone's going to stand, but it should be a really awesome season. Now, one game I am looking forward to, though, this year, he is returning to Carolina.
Yeah.
I don't know when, of course, because the opponents, they haven't released the actual schedule. They're just telling us the opponents. But
a few weeks from now, we'll know.
Yeah, it should be a very, very, very
and it was kind of an unceremonious game last year. That was a game they could have locked the playoffs on the home field. That was when Haskins was just horrible. There was a controversy during the week. He was out at some strip club for his girlfriend's birthday or whatever it was. And that was just kind of the end to him, obviously, because he was terrible and he was not ready to play. And then you look at, up here, they have Marty Herney, the former Panthers GM, who was with Ron as well. And I mean, this whole staff is like Panthers North now. So it's going to mean a lot to a lot of people. And, they were good. Look, they did some good things down there. I know people will always nitpick and say, well, they didn't win, they went to a Super Bowl, they didn't win a Super Bowl. And then the consistency level, they have some really good years, they have some down years, what have you. But, the one thing you never question about Ron, I respect here, and seeing him here in the early going, it kind of reminds me of when the 1 year Marty Schottenheimer was here. Is like, you just know the effort, and then the professionalism about it's going to be there. Like the team, the players they're going to give it everything for this guy. They believe in their coach. They're going to be organized. They're not going to be caught off guard. They're not going to look like the dumbest team in the NFL, which frankly, for the 6 years of Jay Gruden, it happened a lot. You look like, wow, how did you miss that? The disorganization, and it permeated, from the top on down to the field at that time. And, we'll see. I mean, it's a good start. I mean, there's always stuff behind the scenes here that you always got to worry about. But I think like the Ron's part of the franchise equation right now, I feel really good about. I hope he can keep his grip on it because he's definitely been a huge plus here in the short time he's been here. Awesome.
Well, Scott, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join me here on the Alec Walt Show.
Alec, always good talking to you. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. Well, that's going to be it for this episode of the Alec Walt Show. I'm your host, Alec Walt, alongside Scott Jackson, the game day voice of the Washington football team. What do you think of Washington this upcoming season? Feel free to comment that below. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Down the Block Sports for more of my exclusive content. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you